Discover how an inspiring child's amazing call to action transformed a millionaire's life forever. Jack Taylor peered out from the window of his sprawling estate, the kind of house that screamed success but felt like a gilded cage. Beyond the perfectly manicured lawns, he could see the signs of decay in the town that surrounded him. Boarded-up shops, flickering streetlights, a shadow of the vibrancy he once knew as a child. At 45, he'd mastered the art of smiling at charity galas while remaining emotionally distant, and today was no different. Yet a gnawing emptiness consumed him, a whisper that maybe all this wealth couldn't repair what was broken within. Today, driven by an unnameable compulsion, he signed up to volunteer at a local charity, something well outside his comfort zone. A first for him, but he masked his nervousness under layers of corporate confidence. Arriving, he felt the stark contrast between himself and the vibrant energy of the volunteers around him, especially Mia, the 9-year-old dynamo with hair like a tumbleweed and a spirit much like the sun. She poured herself into the charity's work, passionately advocating for the school garden, which the town council had determined would be raised for yet another shopping center. Her fervor rattled him, awakening memories he had tucked away. His father, the gardener, coaxing plants to life. Jack listened as Mia painted her dreams in vivid strokes, her voice breaking as she spoke about the joy the garden brought to her classmates. His heart sank, recognizing the echoes of his own aspirations swallowed by ambition. Did that little patch of earth mean more than the shiny new things his company sought to build? A flicker of purpose ignited within him, yet the chains of his corporate obligations weighed heavy. Jack sat on a bench, looking at Mia as she rallied the other kids, her tiny hands gesturing towards the sky, as if she could rewrite fate. He thought about his office, the board meetings, the ruthless calculations and mere numbers that dictated his existence. Was he too far gone to feel connected to anything outside the grip of profit margins? Doubt twisted in his chest, but it was laced with determination. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The crossroads loomed large. Mia's dream versus the company's bottom line. Jack wrestled with memories that felt like shackles, knowing the business world he inhabited treated family legacy as an inconvenience. The thought of losing everything his father worked for, trading it in for corporate gain, gnawed at his conscience. The stakes were dangerously high. With each passing moment, the weight of his choices further buried the yearning for connection under piles of spreadsheets and quarterly reports. As tensions rose, Jack felt the world around him start to constrict, air thick with anticipation. He glimpsed the heart of his conflict. Was success defined by wealth or by contribution? As his mind raced, a visceral fear crept in. Could he, a man so deeply entwined in the grasps of materialism, dare to challenge the institution that had shaped him? The way forward remained uncertain, but the day of reckoning loomed, and Jack was faced with a choice that might redefine everything he thought he knew about himself. Would he preserve his legacy, or could he forge a new path towards something that truly mattered? Jack stared at Mia, the embodiment of hope and determination, untainted by the cynicism that had crept into his own life. The garden was not just a patch of dirt and seeds. It was a microcosm of possibility, a representation of dreams that thrived with nurturing. Feeling a spark ignite deep within him, Jack wrestled with the excitement swirling in his gut and the paralyzing fear of change. Each glance at the children digging and planting sent waves of awareness coursing through his every vein. Could he really step away from the world of profit margins and boardroom victories? What if he committed even a fraction of his resources to empower these young voices? The thought was intoxicating, yet terrifying. Just as quickly, he envisioned the inevitable resistance from his colleagues, family, and the legacy he had curated. He recalled the last board meeting, where he had stood firm about diverting funds toward a more lucrative venture, slashing budgets that could have supported community improvement initiatives. The shadow of shame danced lightly at the edges of his mind. This moment, contrasting the corporate greed he had embraced, felt like a slap across his consciousness. Was he really that man? "Mr. Taylor, would you help us?" Mia's voice broke through his reverie, her eyes wide with sincerity and hope. "Help with what?" he asked, finding his voice barely a whisper. It was as if the child had pierced through his corporate facade, seeking a truth buried beneath layers of neglect. "The garden. We need someone who believes it can be something more. I know you can help us save it." Her eagerness and belief were palpable. A wave of nostalgia washed over him. He had lost his own father far too early, the man who taught him to nurture life, to take pride in small triumphs. The memories, heavy with regret and longing, raced through his mind, reminding him of a time when he reveled in creation rather than consumption. He looked into Mia's hopeful gaze and felt a flicker of his own childlike dreams surfacing. It was a defining moment, clarity seeping into the edges of his consciousness like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. What if he could truly make a difference? Not for the sake of profit, but for the sake of the community he once cherished. Could he reclaim the narrative of his life? Yet, as exhilarating as the thought was, reality hovered nearby. The unseen but very real pressures and expectations of the corporate world he had inhabited for so long. Would he be judged as a fool for risking his reputation, or worse, his wealth? "Let me think about it," Jack finally said, a tremor of determination lacing his voice. The words hardly felt like enough, but they were a starting point, a tentative agreement to shift his focus. As the kids cheered, Jack felt a mix of fear and exhilaration surging through him. What would this commitment entail? Would his peers mock him for aligning with a cause so far removed from the merciless realm of business? Should he dare challenge his own ingrained beliefs about success? Days turned into restless nights as Jack wrestled with his motivations. The intricate dance between ambition and authenticity left him sleepless, each breath fueling a growing desire to take action. Should he confront his board with a proposal to invest in the community, or better yet, reject the notion of profit-driven existence altogether? The daunting choice ahead loomed unforgiving. Would he step into the light, or retreat into the shadows of his past decisions? He had to know what lay beyond the confines of his corporate cocoon. As he paced the expanse of his estate, Jack realized that the time for consideration had passed. The confrontation with his past was unavoidable, and change knocking at his door had reached a crescendo. He would have to face not only the board, but also himself. The next move would define him in ways he never anticipated. With a new urgency, Jack knew a declaration awaited him at the brink of this metamorphosis, one that could either dampen the spark of hope ignited by a child or elevate it to new heights. What if this decision was not just about the garden, but about the man he would decide to become? Would he meet Mia's expectations, or would fear hold him back once more? Jack awoke the next morning with a sense of clarity that cut through the fog of doubt. The sun streamed through his bedroom window, illuminating the walls that had witnessed years of financial ambition and personal isolation. Here, surrounded by the relics of his success, he felt a stirring resolve brewing within him, urging him against complacency. He glanced at the framed accolades lining his desk, the reminders of his former self. Perhaps it was time to dismantle that image and venture into uncharted territory. As he moved through his morning routine, his thoughts drifted back to the garden. He envisioned Mia's bright eyes, her unwavering belief in something greater than themselves. The children had inspired him, but this spark wasn't merely a fleeting moment. It was a stirring call to action, one that resided deep within him, waiting to be embraced. Yet the reality came crashing back as he donned his tailored suit, a symbol of the corporate world that had stifled him for too long. The meeting with the board loomed over him like a storm cloud, filled with skepticism and resistance. Would he face their judgment unfazed? Would they scorn his newfound ideals as naive? Jack knew they thrived on numbers, metrics, and profit margins. But what if he ventured to propose an investment in humanity itself? With a sense of urgency coursing through him, Jack jotted down notes in a leather-bound notebook that had once belonged to his father. Each point articulated his vision, a plan to convert the neglected corner lot into a community garden, a space for children to learn and grow. His heart raced as he envisioned the possibilities, the flowers sprouting, the laughter of children mingling with the scent of fresh earth. It was a stark contrast to the sterile boardroom atmosphere that had come to define him. Still, self-doubt tugged at the edges of his determination. As he prepared for the meeting, he replayed his past decisions in his mind. What would his colleagues think? Would they see him as an entrepreneur gone soft, surrendering to the sentimental desires of an idealistic young girl? The sharp edges of his corporate identity clashed against the softness of his emerging sense of purpose. Arriving at the boardroom, Jack took a deep breath. The room buzzed with the usual chatter, a sea of familiar faces, each embodying the principles of profit over purpose. He felt a pang of fear, the weight of expectations crushing down on him. But just then, the image of Mia, along with the children, grounded him. They believed in their garden, their future. Shouldn't he have that same belief in the potential to drive change within himself? As the meeting commenced, he watched his colleagues rally against an industry shift that spoke only of revenue, as if kindness in business was a burden rather than an opportunity. Jack's heart drummed with anticipation as he realized that now was the moment to make his stand, the precipice of his transformation. Clearing his throat, he interjected at a lull, surprising even himself with the clarity of his voice. I have a proposal I believe could shift not only our profits, but could also restore purpose to our company. The murmurs subsided, all eyes turning to him, a mixture of expectation and skepticism painting their faces. He leaned in, feeling the stakes rise within him. What if we redirected some of our profits toward community projects? I suggest we start with the creation of a garden, a sustainable project powered by the children in our community. Gasps filled the air, quickly replaced by whispers. He could feel their eyes probing, questioning his integrity. But there was no retreat. He pressed on with passion, detailing his vision of not merely giving back, but also nurturing a future generation capable of creating their destinies. As he witnessed their expressions turning from disbelief to intrigue, a particularly stern member raised an eyebrow, breaking the uneasy silence. And what kind of profit would this generate, Jack? How do you justify this risk? At that moment, Jack realized this wasn't simply a defense of his proposal. It was a confrontation of his values. He held their gaze, feeling the words rising within him. What if the true measure of success is not just profits, but the lives we impact? What if that becomes our new legacy? With these words, he felt the tightly held chains of his former self begin to shatter, an exhilarating blend of fear and hope entwined in his chest. But the board remained unsettled. The air thickened with tension, a crossroads poised to redefine his path and challenge his resolve to confront skepticism head-on. What if, in this transformative moment, he not only fought for the garden, but also for the rebirth of himself? Could he pave a future where he stood not just as a businessman, but as a beacon of possibility? Each second ticked by, preventing him from seeing what lay ahead. Would he find relentless support, or face complete resistance in an unyielding climate? Jack stood at the edge of his conviction, adrenaline surging through him with every heartbeat that echoed in the silence of the boardroom. The question posed by the stern member of the board gnawed at him. How would he justify the risk? Returning to that moment meant wrestling with the impulse to retreat into corporate jargon, weighed down by the instinct to protect the status quo. But he firmly believed something had to change, and that the journey began with him. He paused, allowing himself a moment of introspection amidst the growing tension. What had driven him for so long? Was it merely profit? or had it been about the legacy he would leave behind? The walls of the room felt closer, as if they were confining him to the identity he was desperate to escape. He was more than a number on a balance sheet. He was a father, a friend, and now, a potential champion for a cause larger than himself. With renewed clarity, he went deeper into his argument. Imagine shifting our focus away from short-term fiscal gains toward an investment in our community's future, he urged, the words flowing with an urgency he didn't anticipate. A garden could serve as a living example of innovation, one that enriches both our societal fabric and our bottom line. He knew this path was risky, but wasn't that the very essence of meaningful change? As he continued, snippets of disbelief began to fade, and faint sparks of interest flickered in some of the board members' eyes. Yet the grit of skepticism still hung heavily in the air, drawing him to confront the difficult truths of his proposition. "This isn't just about us," he reminded them, a challenge cloaked in conviction. "It's about creating a narrative that reassesses what success means. Can we not be a company that leads through social responsibility?" He scanned the room, registering the varying reactions. Some were leaning forward, captivated. Others looked doubtful, arms crossed defensively. However, there was one familiar face. The one who had once fueled his ambition, now appearing contemplative. This was Robert, his mentor, and the embodiment of corporate traditionalism. Jack's heart raced. He would have to find a way to get through to him. "Robert," he began, locking eyes with his mentor, "you taught me that businesses shaped the world we live in. What if this could be our legacy, rather than just the next quarterly report?" Jack's voice trembled with emotion, willing the truth of his words to resonate in his mentor's heart. For a heartbeat, the storm of uncertainty seemed to calm. It was then Robert spoke, his brows knitted in thought. "It's not just the garden that worries me, Jack. It's the precedent it sets." Jack felt a visceral knot tighten in his stomach. Was he really here, standing at a precipice defined by his personal growth against the rigid frameworks of a corporate world so many held dear? This was more than a garden. It was the very landscape of his values that had been shaken. Maybe it's about time we set a different precedent. A culture where compassion brings accountability, where caring profits not only us, but those around us. The air remained pregnant with tension, filled with hidden thoughts and silent deliberations. Jack's heartbeat echoed louder, underscoring the critical rift. There was a part of him longing for acceptance, yet another that craved validation of his envisioned future. But Jack also recognized a deeper truth. Change was often met with resistance because it rippled through the foundations of established norms. He was aware of his competitors watching closely, ready to pounce on any vulnerability. But more than that, he felt the children's hopes resting on his shoulders. The realization sparked something profound within him. Perhaps he could be the catalyst for their dreams. "Whether or not you choose to support me today," he concluded, voice steady but fervent, "I refuse to allow fear to dictate our future. I embrace the unknown." As murmurs erupted once more, Jack felt a fleeting rush of optimism tempered with anxiety. Had he planted the seeds of change, or had he dug his own grave? In this critical moment, Jack sensed something shifting within him, a resolve that surged stronger than any boardroom skepticism. But was his willingness to stand by his newfound purpose enough to overcome the age-old corporate mindset? He turned to face the board again, feeling the weight of his potential shift like the seasons, ready for the storm that was to come. Would he find courage, or would he stumble in a confrontation with his fiercest critics, those who demanded conformity over conviction? The moment of transformation loomed closer, but the storm had only just begun. How much longer could he endure the tension as both a businessman and a believer in change? The murmurs in the boardroom ebbed, replaced by an unsettling expectance that set Jack's muscles taut. He wasn't simply presenting an idea. He was presenting a vision, tearing down the facades that had mechanically governed their decisions for so long. As he took a measured breath, he reminded himself, this was not only about the company, it was about redefining himself and what he stood for. Jack's mind raced. What came next? Would he lay out a plan? Anticipating objections was crucial, but amidst the intricate tapestry of corporate politics, he needed to be strategic. He recalled Robert's words about precedent. What if he could transform the concept of risk into a strategy for success that even the naysayers would acknowledge? Imagine a partnership, he projected, stealing his gaze toward Robert. Picture us collaborating with local schools. We could involve the students in maintaining the garden, an investment in their education that has dividends not just in profits, but in their futures. He let his voice rise, infectious enthusiasm spilling over into the room. They'd learn skills, gain pride in their community, and in turn, we'd reap the benefits of a motivated workforce. It's synergy. For a moment, he saw it. The glimmering possibility of hope breaking through the doubt swirling amongst the board members. But clarity often brought scrutiny. How deep were the roots of fear planted in their corporate psyche? What if his metaphorical green thumb would only yield wilted skepticism? He felt the drumming of nerves echoing through him, fueling a determination he hadn't fully grasped. Each passing moment was an opportunity to showcase his growth from the confines of the man he had been, a man too easily tethered to conventional metrics of profit and loss. The idea ignited a flicker of rebellion within him, against not just the board's rigid structure, but also the limitations he had placed on himself. The realization was like a fire igniting within. It wasn't enough to merely advocate for ideas. He had to embody them, to bring them to life through compelling dialogue. Consider, he pressed, urgency coloring his words, how this could redefine us in the eyes of the community and our shareholders. We would emerge as a leader, innovating on corporate social responsibility, something no competitor is yet tackling head-on. This is our opportunity to be pioneers. As he spoke, Jack caught glances exchanged between a few board members, a semblance of consideration, perhaps a flicker of support. But he also sensed the eyes of others still wary, still defensive. His heart sank as doubt threatened to encroach upon his newfound conviction. The thought that he'd face personal embarrassment stung viciously in his gut. Yet they had legends within their grasp, fueled not by fear, but by determination to evolve. Then, Robert's voice broke through the ambient tension, calm yet probing. And if we fail? If the garden yields nothing tangible? Jack squared himself, grounding his emotions. Robert, every breakthrough is rife with uncertainty. But what legacy do we want to build? We will never know until we test our limits. He could feel the heat beneath his skin, awareness flooding him. This wasn't just about persuading Robert. It was about his own trajectory. What does it say about us if we refuse to take that leap? If we allow fear to stifle innovation? Let's craft a narrative where our risks reflect our courage. Silence blanketed the boardroom once more, and something shifted inside him. The decision to confront carried a weight both terrifying and exhilarating. Jack felt the breathtaking rush of a decision that might well define him. He was not just pitching a project. He was reshaping his identity and declaring that he would embrace the uncertain path ahead. But could his peers, those weighted by tradition, ever truly understand this deeper, transformative aspiration? As the silence stretched, a new possibility loomed, one where Jack would have to confront not just the board, but the very essence of who he was becoming. His hands trembled slightly, yet he steadied himself, ready to face whatever challenge emerged from this new revelation. He was rooting for change. The question remained, would they join him? Or would they let fear stifle potential once more? The moment of confrontation lingered in the air like an electric charge. Jack had unlocked something profound within. The next step would demand everything. What unexpected challenge would surface, forcing him to redefine himself yet again? The stage was set for a reckoning, and Jack could sense the urgency rising. The quiet that enveloped the boardroom was suffocating, each member caught in their silence as they grappled with Jack's audacious proposition. The tension weighed heavily on him. The unfamiliar thrill of presenting his vision battled against the tightening grip of anxiety brewing within. It wasn't just the board's acceptance that hung in the balance. It was the future he was sculpting for himself, a future he could either embrace or allow to slip through his fingers. Jack's heart raced as he scanned the faces, some intrigued, others skeptical. The unease was palpable, a stark reflection of the corporate culture housed in the polished walls around him, an environment plagued by conformity. What worth was a garden, after all, in the eyes of balance sheets and quarterly reports? He felt his palms begin to perspire, threatening to betray his otherwise composed demeanor. "Let's think about innovation," Jack pressed, tempering his resolve. He knew he had to strike a chord that resonated. Imagine not just the community's reaction, but also how this could establish us as an industry leader. The narrative we create here could become the foundation of a new corporate identity, one that values sustainability over short-term profit margins. As the words flowed, an internal realization surged within him. This was his moment, his opportunity to weave a narrative that went beyond the boardroom's cold calculations. It wasn't merely a proposal. It was a manifesto challenging the status quo and invoking a sense of purpose that had long been dormant. But with each passing second, doubt pushed at the edges of his confidence, whispering fears of ridicule should he fail. It was Robert who broke through that swirling storm once more, his brow furrowing with skepticism. "You speak of pioneers, Jack. But pioneering can lead to peril. Are we prepared to risk failure?" Jack felt the heat of that challenge brush against his skin, igniting stubborn resolve. What is a pioneering spirit, if not the willingness to risk exactly that? Isn't failure a more valuable teacher than complacency? What we risk losing is our relevance in an evolving marketplace. Every syllable was laced with an intensity he hadn't anticipated. He questioned not just the board's potential resistance, but also his own ingrained hesitations. What if embracing this vision meant tearing down structures he had relied upon as security? What if failing meant dismantling the very essence of who he had always strived to be within this corporate landscape? The realization landed hard. He was standing at the precipice of profound change, not just for the company, but for himself as well. Failure loomed large, yes, but perhaps so did renewal. "Every leader we admire has faced this crossroads," he declared, heart hammering in his chest. "We have the power to redefine who we are. Aren't we at our best when we push through discomfort and innovate beyond tradition?" The boardroom, once a bastion of uncertainty, now felt alive with dormant possibilities. Jack sensed a shift, the energy around him morphing. Yet he knew that acceptance wasn't guaranteed. He had to instigate engagement, compel them to see beyond their entrenched fears. Picture a campaign that not only flourishes in practical terms, but resonates with our consumers personally. Think of the stories they could share, of how we impacted their lives. His fervor wasn't merely to persuade the board. It was a reflection of how profoundly this mission ignited something once quiescent within him. This could redefine the very fabric of his existence, and with that, he drew a breath, fueled by unwavering conviction. The murmurs resumed faintly as board members leaned toward each other, the air electric with anticipation. Jack had crossed a threshold. He was no longer an advocate merely pleading for approval. He was an architect of transformation, poised on the brink of forging a new identity. But just as he welcomed the flicker of agreement, a looming voice interrupted, one that stood firmly on the shores of skepticism. "And what if this turns into a costly endeavor? Are we ready to lose our clients over an experiment?" The question hung in the air, foreshadowing deeper conflicts ahead. Jack's resolve steeled at the challenge. The ground he had gained felt precarious, and suddenly, the journey forward seemed infinitely more complex. What would it take to shake the roots of fear beneath this boardroom's polished surface? He prepared to navigate a critical impasse, one that could either catapult him into a new reality or leave him stranded in conventionality. He squared his shoulders, ready to confront not only the board but the depths of his ambitions. The path had grown murky, and yet he was certain of one thing. He couldn't turn back now. With every word he had just spoken, Jack had stepped closer to a pivotal confrontation, one that would demand he reevaluate his own definitions of success and courage. As the skepticism swirled around him, he realized the stakes had just become much higher. What would he uncover about himself in the impending struggle? The answers awaited just beyond the threshold of this moment. Jack's pulse raced as he scanned the boardroom, his thoughts spinning rapidly like the gears in a finely tuned watch. The question that loomed, the skepticism about costs, clients, and the specter of failure gnawed at the edges of his resolve. Each face around the sleek table felt like a living embodiment of doubt, and the weight of their expectations pressed heavily onto him. "Let's be rational here, Jack," chimed in Sarah, her voice slicing through the mounting tension. "This garden concept may sound appealing, but we need to consider the numbers. What do we have to show for it today?" "Numbers mean nothing without context," he countered, an unexpected edge to his voice. "We can't exist solely as spreadsheets and forecasts. This is about cultivating a deeper relationship with our clients." His mind raced, reminding him of the passion he had once pursued in his early career. The desire to inspire, to innovate, to be more than just a cog in the machine. But with every assertion, doubt crept in, tainting the clear ideals he held. "Passion doesn't pay the bills," Robert replied sharply. The vehemence behind his words sent a jolt through Jack's core. Was passion any less relevant in a world so deeply intertwined with technology and metrics? Desperation clawed at his composure, pushing him to revisit his own motivations. Why had he chosen this path? Jack recalled the innocent enthusiasm from a child who once dreamed of grandeur, a spark that had dulled in the face of pragmatism. That child would not have shied away from a challenge. He would have charged headfirst into it, armed with the belief that failure was simply part of the journey. "Maybe we don't have definitive numbers today," Jack ventured cautiously. "But in investing in something truly sustainable, we're creating an intangible asset that builds loyalty." Loyalty. The word felt refreshing, a breath of air where only stagnation had been. Memories of his early days swirled, moments when passion outshone profit. He was struck by a realization. The vision he fought for was not merely about the company, but about reigniting his own flame of inspiration and authenticity. But that clarity injected a new layer of uncertainty. What if pushing against the board meant risking everything he had clawed to achieve? The executive title, the respected position, the familiarity of control. Would he forsake it all for an ideal? The murmurs continued, edging toward a consensus amidst the swirling trepidation. Jack could feel the shift, yet doubt lingered like a shadow, challenging him to define the cost of success. Would pursuing this vision force him into the unknown, torn from the familiar comforts he had curated for himself? "Let's not ignore the potential fallout," Robert interjected, a sly grin suggesting he had not finished. "What will the shareholders think when our profits dip? How do you explain that?" Jack's heart sank, a heavy reminder of the fine line he was treading outside the corporate script. He needed to confront this tension head-on. "We are not merely following a playbook anymore. We're writers of our own story." Passion erupted within him. It had become a desperate crusade. The journey was as significant as the destination, a notion he had almost dismissed. But as he spoke, internal fears began to surface. The truth was, there lay no real safety net. Would he allow himself to be vulnerable? The thought petrified him even as it exhilarated him. Everyone deserves a chance to believe in a vision. We don't just want customers, we want advocates, people willing to stand with us, not just for our products, but for what we represent, Jack declared, the urgency in his voice sea level rising in intensity as he locked eyes with every board member. They were listening, but would they respond? He breathed, grounding himself in the moment. The next steps required vulnerability he hadn't contemplated, admitting that failure might indeed loom closer than he had acknowledged. Then, as if willed by the weight of that emotion, Jack saw a window of possibility. Perhaps it was through sharing his own fears that he could inspire trust. If we falter, we learn. We're not here to merely survive. We're here to thrive in uncertainty. The board visibly reacted. Some exchanged apprehensive glances, while others leaned in subtly, intrigued. Jack felt the balance shift again. An opening, a chance to not only reshape the company, but also to redefine his own narrative. But there was a lingering whisper of doubt that surfaced once more, toying with the edges of his initiative. What awaited him on this fragile journey toward transformation? How much was he willing to risk within himself as well as for the company? He understood he stood at a juncture, undaunted yet unnerved. The moment demanded clarity on what he valued most. Jack braced himself. The confrontation wasn't over. The truth of his ambitions awaited in the heart-pounding uncertainty of the next decision. Before he could absorb the shift, Robert straightened, his expression one of raw disbelief mixed with curiosity. Maybe there's merit in your vision, Jack, but are you prepared for what may happen if we take the plunge? Jack realized the true struggle was only beginning, encapsulated in Robert's challenge. It was time to truly confront the lion's share of his future head-on. Jack felt the room tighten around him, the air thickening with unvoiced concerns. Everything hinged on this moment. A collective breath seemed to hold the tension as he contemplated Robert's challenge. The flickering overhead lights threw shadows that danced across the polished table, mirroring the turmoil within him. Could he summon the courage to shock the system and elevate the company, or would he buckle under the pressure? Taking a decisive step forward, he weighed his words carefully. If we take that plunge, we won't just be diving into uncertainty, we'll be building a legacy. We can either be leaders who adapt to change, or spectators to our own demise. His gaze swept across each member, searching for a hint of understanding. They were at a crossroads, and so was he. The idea of leading rather than following pulsed within him, but with it came a swell of responsibility. What if the change he envisioned backfired? Failure could mean more than a financial drop. It could tarnish everything he'd worked for. His reputation, the carefully crafted alliances, the professional image he had constructed brick by brick. Jack caught a flash of doubt in Sarah's eyes, and it hit him. Perhaps they all needed a little prompting, a different perspective. You see, he continued, gathering momentum. This isn't just about numbers. It's about creating genuine experiences for our clients. When they're part of our journey, they don't just remain customers. They become champions of our brand. Imagine the word of mouth. The murmurs shifted again, doubt warring with curiosity. For the first time, he could see that the board was momentarily torn between skepticism and intrigue. Jack pressed ahead, feeling a surge of conviction. We've become so focused on the bottom line that we've lost sight of the bigger picture, a community that believes in us, an ethos that aligns with our mission. But the more he spoke, a creeping realization formed. Was he truly prepared to expose this vulnerability? Did he have what it took to lead them into the unknown, against the current of established comfort? He needed a catalyst, something that would solidify this resolve. In that moment, an idea struck him. A personal story, one that connected him to the very essence of his argument. I grew up wanting to change the world. I used to imagine how one small action could ripple outward. What if we became the company that rooted for others to flourish? He paused, letting the weight of his words settle, hoping to ignite an emotional reaction within them. What if we became a source of inspiration instead of just another business? The faces began to shift, intrigue etched on their features. But doubt remained a flickering shadow, tempting him to retreat. Jack leaned in, crafting his ultimatum with intention. We need to be brave. We can measure success, but what about fulfillment? What do we stand for? The silence in the room was palpable. He poured himself into the moment, ready to confront the pushback. I'm asking for you. to reimagine what success looks like for us. Are we just here to crunch numbers, or are we eager to make an impact? Passion isn't a liability. It's our greatest asset. The garden may seem indulgent now, but think of the growth it could yield. Robert's brow furrowed, an unmistakable glimmer of reconsideration lighting up his eyes. So you're saying... Yes, Jack interrupted, feeling a thread of stubbornness strengthen within him. I'm saying it's time to reshape our narrative, to lead with heart in a world that often values cold efficiency over real essence. The board members exchanged glances filled with contemplation. Jack could see he had struck a chord, but there was still discomfort lingering on their faces. Did they grasp just how immense this leap could be? Would he truly be able to walk the path he was advocating? Resistance can only lead us so far, Jack pressed, clarity crystallizing in his mind. To build a future we believe in, we must acknowledge our fears and courageously rise beyond them. But as murmurs rose once more, Jack caught wind of the unease reasserting itself. If these doubts festered, they could undermine everything he was striving for. How far would he need to go to turn their uncertain steps into a united march? With the tension rising again, he braced himself. What if the very vulnerability he sought to wield could betray him? More importantly, could he stand firm in this fight for authenticity? A wave of unease gripped him, and yet, within that fear, a fervent realization emerged. A decision awaited him, one that would determine not only the company's direction, but the authenticity of his own journey. As Robert leaned back, folding his arms, a challenging gaze settled in. What's your next move then, Jack? Are you ready to truly transform this company? The moment of truth loomed, and Jack understood he was at yet another juncture. What would he choose now? Would he fortify his resolve, or slip back into the familiar embrace of caution? He exhaled slowly, mentally preparing for the battle ahead, one that would lay bare his deepest aspirations and fears. Jack's heart raced as the challenge hung in the air, heavy and palpable. He felt the weight of not just the board's expectations, but also his own aspirations pressing down on him like a concrete slab. What would it mean if he chose to forge ahead? Each breath was a reminder of the critical choice he faced. He glanced around the room, the expressions of his colleagues offering glimpses into their minds, flashes of doubt mixed with a spark of possibility. He needed to grasp that spark, fan it into a flame, and guide them through the dark uncertainty that lay ahead. Rubbing the back of his neck, he focused on Robert, whose eyebrow still arched skeptically. What empowers you to think this could work? Robert probed, his skepticism sharp as a knife. Jack could feel the team hanging on his response, their future entwined with the answers he would give. Jack needed evidence, not just his vision. He began to recount a recent project that had been met with skepticism, one that turned out to be unexpectedly successful. You remember Serenity Solutions? The team initially called it a gamble. The numbers didn't look good on paper. But we listened to our clients. We built a narrative around their stories and experiences. And guess what happened? The engagement soared, and we saw a major boost in sales. It wasn't just about making a sale. It was about nurturing a connection. The room fell silent, minds turning over the implications of his words. Jack pressed on. That's what we're looking to do on a larger scale now, but with authenticity and purpose. The conviction in his voice surged, fueled by the potential unfolding before him. We risk losing ourselves if we keep shrouding our company with facades for profit. His voice wavered slightly, revealing his inner conflict, yet he fought against it. This isn't just about numbers. It's about redefining what success looks like for all of us. It's creating real, human connections. Wouldn't you want to be part of a workplace where we're proud to say what we stand for? A lingering silence trailed his words, leaving him both vulnerable and exposed. It was that very vulnerability he initially feared that now became his shield. He noticed Sarah's resolute nod. Perhaps he was breaking through the wall of hesitation after all. Imagine, he continued, excitement mingling with a hint of fear, if we could be pioneers in an industry desperate for authenticity. How would it feel to be the company known for bold choices, a brand people respect? Our market strategy may shift, but we can drive that change together. Jack allowed himself to float these ideas, letting his passion radiate like sunlight. If he could awaken that energy in the room, surely they would be compelled to step into this new paradigm alongside him. This is not solely on me. It's our collective journey. We're stronger when we create a narrative together. The unease still simmered beneath the surface, and Jack knew he needed to solidify the conversation into tangible action. Let's commit to a trial. Why not host a workshop? We reach out to our clients, gather their insights, and design new initiatives based on that feedback. We'll show the world that we can pivot, rethink, and ultimately thrive, not just in profit, but in impact. Robert leaned forward, fingers steepled. A workshop, you say? How would we measure its success? Jack took a deep breath, confident in his turn to the practical. Data, feedback, engagement rates. These aren't just figures. This is our narrative being reshaped. Success can come in many forms. The stories we gather, the partnerships we build, and the passion within our team. Imagine the case studies to come from that. Jack felt a slow burn of determination building inside him, while still battling against a shadow of fear. Could he truly guide them through this? Would they rally behind a cause far greater than the numbers? In that moment, the unyielding weight of uncertainty transformed into a flicker of hope. Okay then, Robert said, a smirk of reluctant admiration playing on his lips. Let's say we take this workshop seriously. You'd better link arms with us when the critics start knocking. The recognition of their shared risk stoked the fire within him, propelling him toward action. Absolutely, Jack agreed, resolve hardening in his chest. They were no longer simply colleagues discussing a concept. They were embarking on a collaborative journey. A million uncertainties loomed, each one threatening. But was this intersection not the moment he had long sought? Wasn't courage often intertwined with the unknown, a chance to unleash his not-so-inner visionary? Determined, Jack's mind raced with the scope of possibility ahead. As the meeting wrapped, Jack recognized that he was no longer just advocating for change. He was standing on the precipice of transformation, ready to embrace the uncertainty with newfound confidence. Unbeknownst to him, the ripples of this decision would extend beyond boardrooms, demanding courage from within, and ultimately forging a path to something unexpected, something that would challenge every principle he held dear. Could he balance the tension between ambition and fear? How would he manage the critics that lay in wait? As he left the room, determination coursed through him. Yet a question remained, echoing ominously in his mind. What lay beneath the surface of this venture? Challenges he never anticipated. Jack Taylor emerged from the boardroom, heart racing with the dual thrill of victory and dread. The idea that had once felt like an aspiration was now a tangible commitment. The decision felt monumental, yet shadows of uncertainty loomed large over every step he took. Would the workshop lead to the change he imagined or morph into a corporate debacle that could undermine everything he built? Over the next several weeks, Jack acted with intentionality. He organized teams to develop outreach programs, inviting stakeholders, local schools, and community members to engage with the garden project. Each meeting was laden with eagerness, and while Jack felt an unusual vulnerability, he learned to embrace it. The stark shift from the sterile confines of traditional meetings to collaborative brainstorming sessions where laughter and brainstorming flowed revitalized him. Jack poured genuine effort into the workshops. He witnessed the community's excitement grow as families shared their hopes and dreams, spurred on by the possibility of nurturing a garden, claiming it as a space for both education and inspiration. Through each conversation, he found himself transformed. The metrics he once worshipped now felt secondary to the lives they could touch. Days turned into weeks, and the garden's potential flourished like freshly sprouted seedlings. Jack marveled at how a single decision, one seemingly fragile moment of clarity, had shifted not only his trajectory, but also that of the community. The initial hesitations of the board members had dulled, replaced by a palpable enthusiasm. At the culminating community event, Jack stood proudly before a small gathering in the now thriving garden. Children giggled while planting seedlings, and parents reveled in the connections forged. It was a vibrant tapestry of joy, hope, and determination. An opportunity to cultivate dreams and ambitions. In that moment, Jack felt more than satisfaction. He felt renewal. He had stepped beyond the confines of his corporate identity, rediscovered the values he had long neglected, and turned the tide toward authentic leadership. A bond rooted in purpose and contribution solidified his standing both within the company and the community. Today symbolizes more than a garden, Jack began, his voice steady, resonating with a captivating authority. It represents the power of our collective efforts to redefine success, one that no longer measures worth by profits alone, but by the relationships we foster. The crowd cheered, and he caught sight of Mia, her eyes sparkling like the colorful flowers they'd just planted. She beamed with pride, an embodiment of hope they had all worked together to cultivate. The applause was deafening as he felt a wave of emotion wash over him. Recognition trickled into view. The board members who once shadowed him with skepticism now stood united, recognizing the ripple effect of investing in humanity. Feedback from customers mirrored their transformation. The company's reputation soared as individuals connected with this newfound purpose. He had conquered the divisions within himself. Jack had evolved from a businessman focused solely on profit to a leader who understood the true value of contribution. He no longer felt trapped in a gilded cage. He had transformed it into a launchpad for profound change. Jack stood tall, feeling complete. He realized that the only legacy worth cementing wasn't confined to stock prices or corporate accolades. It was about the enduring impact on lives. The garden blossomed, and so did he, cultivated by the resilience born from vulnerability and the courage to embrace uncertainty. As he left that day, an affirmation resonated deep within him. He had become the person he aspired to be, demonstrating that true achievement lay within guiding others to overcome their challenges. This wasn't just about a garden. It was about nurturing a legacy. If you believe in the power of individual journeys and personal transformation, you need to subscribe now to witness the continuation of these inspiring stories. Don't miss out. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread this message of hope. Comment below with your reactions and theories about this transformative story. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Because together, we can inspire personal growth everywhere.